If you're a 90s kid, you remember the bucket hat. Back then, bucket hats were huge. Everyone was wearing them. Musicians, celebrities, TV stars, everybody. And guess what? They are back. Today, we're gonna time travel back to the 90s and we're going to make a bucket hat. I'm gonna go over with you step by step how to create it. And I've got a free pattern for you to download at sewanastasia.com. First thing you need to do is download that pattern. It's a super beginner-friendly pattern. And even if you're not making this hat today, you are gonna learn all kinds of tips and tricks for sewing curves because this hat is all curves. So before you cut it out, you wanna measure your head. So take a tape measure, wrap it around the biggest part of your head, and see where that measuring tape goes. Mine right here says 22.5. So I know I need to cut out the hat that's a medium for 23. So this pattern is size 22, 23, and 24. Small, medium, and large. After you figure out your size, cut out your pattern and your fabric. Once you've done that, you should have these pieces here. We've got 4 for the side, 2 for the top, and 4 for the brim. Now that we've got it cut out, it's time to get into sewing. The first step for sewing is going to be placing your brim and your sides together, right sides together, and then we're gonna sew up these sides here. So right sides together, sew it up, both ends. Right sides together, sew it up, both ends, and so on. So you should have 2 sets of brims and 2 sets for the sides. The seam allowance is going to be 3/8 of an inch for the whole hat. So let's go sew it up. Now we're done with our sides. Now we have all those little side seams sewn up and I have ironed them open so that way they are nice and flat. So the next step you don't have to do, but if you want to add some real 90s flair, grab a patch and we're going to sew it on to this wider curved shape. If you are going to sew a patch, you're going to sew it on right in the middle and make sure it's in the middle of this width. Make sure it's not too close to the bottom or too close to the top. Otherwise, it's going to get caught in your seam allowance. And when you sew it on, make sure you're just going through one layer. Now you got a few options. You can straight stitch it around the edge or you could zigzag it around the edge as well. And if you'd like more detail on how to sew a patch on something, make sure you check out my videos on that. There will be links down below. So let's go sew that patch on. I'm just gonna work my way all the way around the patch. I have the cat sewed on and we are looking so 90s. If you're not already a subscriber to Sew Anastasia, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell so you know when all the new videos come out. And if you're already a subscriber, thank you so much for watching today and following along. Now let's get back to finishing our bucket hat. This hat is really coming together. It is now time to put the top of the hat on. On the top pattern, you're gonna notice these notches on it. You're gonna wanna notch them out and mark with your marking tool right where they're at. So the double notch is indicating the sides of the hat, and then the single notch is indicating the front and the back of the hat. You're also going to mark the notch on the side pattern piece because that's going to indicate the very center of this curve shape here. And we are going to line that up with the single notch on the top of the hat pattern. Now here's where it starts to get just a little bit tricky because now we have all of these curves to start sewing together. But I know you got this, so let's go. I've turned the side of my hat inside out, so the seam allowances are facing me. And now I'm going to match up that single notch right sides together and put a pin. And now I'm gonna move over to the double notch and make sure that it's lining up with the side seam of the side of the hat. I'm going to line up the other side seam. And now I'm going to line up that other single notch for the back of the hat. Okay, so now I have my 4 notches marked and it's starting to look like a hat. I also think it's a good idea to go through and put more pins in between the notches. Just make sure you're lining up these edges. And if it looks a little wobbly at the top, that's totally fine as long as you're not pinning any pleats or tucks into it. You'll be good. And now I'm all pinned up. Okay, let's do this. Make sure you take out your pins before you get to them and just really make sure your fabric's flat while you're sewing. If you have like a little buckle or a pleat here, just stop, flatten out your fabric, make sure your edges are lined up, which is going to be really important to maintain the shape. Now we've got that top sewn on and it's looking great. Look at this, you guys. We are so on our way to a bucket hat. So now what you need to do is the same thing to the other set. That's right, this one here is going to be the lining. So that means you could totally sew this out of a different fabric because you're not going to see it on the outside. Now we're going to do a little edge stitch around the top of the hat. You're going to do this to both pieces and we're going to be stitching right here on this like side part of the hat. And you want to stitch down the seam allowance. So you're going to have to take the seam allowance in here and you're going to have to press it down towards the side of that hat. But when you do this, you're going to be stitching from the outside. So that way you can make sure it's nice and clean and crisp on the outside of your hat. So I've got my seam lined up with my 1/8 of an inch on the foot, and I'm going to keep this nice and flat, kind of pulling it apart while I sew it. So that way I don't get any bumps or tucks in it. The thing to remember when sewing curves is just concentrate on the inch in front of you. Don't worry about the funky shape that the rest of the garment is creating. Though these two tops look great, the top looks so nice and professional with that little edge stitch on there. So nice and crisp. Now grab your brims and we're going to sew one to each set. So right sides together, we are lining up the side seams on the hat, and then you're going to fit it around the circle shape like you did with the other two pieces. And just make sure you're lining up those side seams so that way everything stays nice and even and symmetrical. For the lining one, you're going to do the same thing, line it up on the side seams. Make sure all your seams are nice and pressed open so it's not bulky when you sew over it. But there's one trick to this one. You need to leave an opening so that way later we can turn it right side out and have nice finished edges. So I would say right at the back of the hat here, I would leave a 2-inch opening, which means you're not going to sew together that 2 inches right here at the back of the hat. So let's go sew some brims. Don't forget your seam allowance is 3/8 of an inch, and don't forget to back stitch as well. And we're done with that part. We are looking so good. This one is the outside of the hat, and this one is going to be the lining. And you can see that I left my opening right here, so that way we can turn it right side out later. Now what we're going to do is another edge stitch to the middle part of this hat here. And we're only doing it to the outside hat. Okay, we finished that edge stitch. We have that row of edge stitching going all the way around the brim, and it is looking beautiful. Now it's time to put these two hats together. Now what we're going to do is take the inner one and we're going to flip it the opposite way. And we are going to place these right sides together. So you're going to have to squish them on top of each other. Make sure you are lining up these side seams. Let's go ahead and pin it all the way around the brim. And then we're going to sew 3/8 of an inch all the way around the hat. Here we go. Let's sew these two layers together. Remember when you're sewing curves to just make sure that the edge up here is lined up with your seam allowance mark. Ours is the edge of the foot for 3/8 of an inch. After we do that, we're going to find that opening that we left right here. And then we're going to take the hat and flip it right side out. Look at how cool this hat looks. It is all inside out right now. So you're just going to take it and push it through that opening so that way you can flip it. Oh my gosh, look at it. It is looking so good. And then after we do that, we are going to do a little edge stitch around the brim, and then we're gonna do a couple rows of top stitching all the way around, so that way it keeps it nice and structured, and it's gonna add a little detail to it. And if you wanna get all crazy, you can even add a row of decorative stitches all the way around the brim of the hat. Now I'm going to close up the opening by placing both of the edges right on top of each other and sewing them down. This is the same way you would close a lining if you were closing it in a jacket as well. There we go. You can see right where we closed up that opening. And that's gonna be on the inside of the hat. We did it! Here is our bucket hat with our cat patch. So we gave this hat beautiful edge stitches to keep it nice and crisp. We did our rows of stitches around the brim. We even added a patch, and it's fully lined. How cool is that? And it fits great. Check it out. Love it. And don't forget, this pattern is free, so make sure you download it at sewinganastasia.com, and you can make yourself so many new bucket hats this spring. And if you make one, make sure you tag me at sewinganastasia, and I would love to reshare it with everyone else. Thanks so much for watching Sewing Anastasia today. If you have any questions on making the bucket hat, make sure you leave it down below in the comments, and I'll get back with you as soon as I can. And if you're not already a subscriber, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell so you know when those new videos come out. And if you're already a subscriber, thank you so much for watching today. And don't forget to follow me on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and all the other social media so that way we can stay connected and creative together. And I also teach sewing classes in my design studio here in Chicago, Illinois. So check those out at sewanastasia.com. And coming this spring is the Sew Anastasia Sewing Academy. So you can take all of my classes virtually as well. So make sure you check that out in the spring. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.